Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. The USC commitment sweatshirt coming on once again as four-star linebacker Jadon Perlotte flipping his commitment from the Georgia Bulldogs to USC in the 2025 cycle. And where you want to start with Jadon Perlotte, a guy that we've talked extensively about in the 2025 cycle, just not really connected to USC. You're looking at one of the more versatile front seven defenders that you see in this 2025 cycle. Could certainly play off-ball linebacker, could certainly kick onto the line of scrimmage and come off the edge. Probably 3 or 4 different positions that Jadon Perlotte could play at the college football level. And I think what's so fascinating about Jadon Perlotte coming to USC, who is his lead recruiter, or what seemed to be his lead recruiter bringing him to USC, it seemed to be Coach Henne. And so does that maybe tell us about how Jadon Perlotte is expected to be used in this USC defense? But I think more importantly, I think this is a really good fit in this Dan Lin defense where, Dan Lin's been very vocal. And something I appreciate the most about Dan Lin, he's not necessarily a scheme-specific coach. He's a personnel coach and says, hey, we don't have a particular scheme that we want to run. We are going to kind of scheme our defense around the personnel that we have. And so you kind of just trust that Dan Lin is going to use a guy like Jadon Perlotte to the best of his capability. But again, what's so exciting about Jadon Perlotte and what we're going to see on the film, this kid can do so many different things on the defensive side of the football. Premier athlete. Really excited to get into this one. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and to the USC fans. It's been a blast talking this program on the recruiting trail over the last couple of days. You guys continue to show a ton of love to the boys. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into Jadon Perlotte. I want to talk about first where I kind of expect him to play for USC, and that's probably at that off-ball linebacker position, specifically because how good he is in space. And we talk a lot about this. We talk the exact same thing with Matai Togiai committing to USC in the 2025 cycle as well. You look at where the sport of college football is going, even into the Big Ten, you got to have your linebackers that are able to operate in space. I mean, whether it's carrying tight ends up the seam, whether it's dropping back in zone coverage, tackling running backs in the flat, you got to have athletic linebackers that can cover a lot of ground and match up with all the speed that we're seeing offenses put on the football field. Jadon Perlotte is one of those modern era college football linebackers where he is a premier athlete that covers a lot of ground, that can do a lot of different things. So I personally see him as an off-ball linebacker. But what I think is the most fascinating part about Jadon Perlotte is, all right, maybe on some of those third and long situations, you can walk him to the line of scrimmage and ask him to get off to the passer because, again, ton of juice off the line of scrimmage. You see him play that edge rusher role plenty at Buford, Georgia during the junior year of film. So you look at Jadon Perlotte and say, there's a lot of different things he could do for this USC defense, and I think you'll get a better sense of it when you turn on the film. One thing that you love is what he can do in coverage. He is so long, and you're talking about dropping linebackers in zone coverage, having them have the ability to kind of take away throwing windows, especially over the middle of the field. But Jadon Perlotte can do that. Taking a look at this rep right here, one, really good instincts, reading the quarterback's eyes, cutting off the pass, taking it the other way. Jadon Perlotte operates in space, in coverage exceptionally well. But then you continue to roll through the film and say so many different things that he does. This is kind of how I see him getting used, at least in some of those third and long situations where we'll play him at the overhang linebacker, maybe late in the play clock. We're going to run him up to the line of scrimmage, ask him to get after the quarterback, get into the backfield. This kid plays with his hair on fire. I mean, he is just everywhere on the film doing so many different things. Once again, lining up as an edge rusher, getting out in space, really good feel here. You talk about not only just being a really good athlete, but not biting on the play action, understanding what's going on in the backfield, and then the ability, it's really good instincts. Not only physically, very impressive to change direction, go close the distance on the ball carrier, but more importantly, you love the instincts and IQ that this kid plays with. You saw it on the interception. You see it once again. He does so many different things. Coming off the edge right here, again, really, really good feel. If you want to, one, you can kind of get creative in terms of how you want to use Jadon Perlotte and probably get him as a free rusher more times than not, kind of confusing opposing offensive lines. You kind of see it right here, left unblocked off the edge. The ability to just close the distance and go get after the quarterback, that's something that really does stand out on the film. You continue to work through the film. Now you see him kind of playing that nickel role. I mean, Jadon Perlotte is a guy that you can play all over the football field, and he can operate in space. He's a guy that, as a front seven defender, can trigger downhill and be physical at the point of attack. He is an extremely physical linebacker. You talk about linebackers you want to bet on in the Big Ten. Jadon Perlotte is that kind of guy. Here we are coming off the edge once again. Again, really good feel, play action, doesn't bite too hard, doesn't crash, and then go close the distance. I think Jadon Perlotte can do so many different things within this USC defense. That's what excites me the most because, all right, let's go back to why we were so excited about Dan Lynn taking the job at USC. I think it starts with what makes him a great defensive coordinator. He knows how to use his personnel. The most impressive things that I've heard Dan Lynn say during some of these offseason interviews, we are going to focus on putting these players in the best spots for them to be successful. That's something that Alex Grinch just did a miserable job at for USC. So you take a guy like Jadon Perlotte and say, all right, he can come off the edge. He can play off-ball linebacker. He can drop in coverage. He can spy the quarterback. Now we got to figure out the best ways to get Jadon Perlotte involved in this defense. Kind of, I wouldn't say he's just like Eric Gentry, but kind of reminds you of the kind of unicorn specimen that Eric Gentry is at the linebacker spot. Obviously, Eric Gentry a little bit taller, but guys that can do kind of similar things in terms of an athletic profile. We kind of just trust Dan Lynn a little bit more than Alex Grinch and the defensive coaching staff we saw the last 2 years in terms of maximizing these kind of guys. And I think another thing that's really standing out to me is you're starting to see what kind of players that Dan Lynn and this defensive coaching staff want. We talked last night about a guy like Joshua Holland committing to USC. Big, long, physical cornerback. That is what USC wants at the boundary cornerback spot. They want guys that are big, that can get hands on wide receivers. You take a look at the linebacker room, even going back to last class, but specifically the last couple linebackers that have committed, Matai Togiai and Jadon Perlotte. I mean, just two hyped up athletic linebackers that can go pretty much sideline to sideline and has a ton of speed and a ton of athleticism. Now, for both Jadon Perlotte and Matai Togiai, you probably got to put a little bit more weight on the frame. They both have big frames. I mean, Jadon Perlotte 6'3", Matai Togiai 6'4". These linebackers are long. They're extremely athletic. They'll add some weight once they get into this USC program. But what is USC prioritizing at the linebacker position in terms of the high school athletes that they are recruiting? We need athletic linebackers that can do a lot of different things, that can cover a lot of ground. Quite frankly, that's just where the sport of college football is going. You're seeing so many offenses try to put so much speed on the football field. And if you have these linebackers that are just not athletic enough to operate in space, offenses will attack those linebackers, whether it's tight ends up the seam running by linebackers, whether it's getting these linebackers in man coverage on running backs. You need these linebackers to be able to operate in space, operate athletically. That is exactly what USC is building in this linebacker room. And talk about flipping a commitment, a in-state kid from the Georgia Bulldogs, makes you feel pretty good. And again, he's going into his senior year. You feel a little bit better about this one sticking. You beat out Georgia. You beat out Tennessee, Florida State for this commitment. Massive job by this USC coaching staff. Little bit of momentum for USC building on the recruiting trail. We'll cut it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.